Mary had a little lamb.
The fault. We believe that all men are created equal.
To the magnificent mosaic that is America.
From radio beacon to radio beacon. I have a dream. Change has come to America.
Believe me.
Help is on the way.
Knock, knock. Who's there?
It's a figment of your imagination.
Randi Rhodes Show.
Turn up your mind.
The Three-Fifths Compromise was a direct effort to ensure that southern states never got the population necessary to continue the practice of slavery everywhere else in the country.
What?
What does that mean? Appropriation based on population. That's how we pick. Everybody in here knows we've got 9, I hope I'm right, 9 state representatives. By limiting the number of population in the count, they specifically limited the number of representatives that would be available in the slave-holding states, and they did it for the purpose of ending slavery.
What?
Well before Abraham Lincoln, well before a Civil War. Do we talk about that? I don't hear that anywhere in this conversation across the country. I don't know how we've gotten here. I don't know what we do about it, but talking about changing our history, changing's not the right word.
No.
Talking about incorporating another view of history while ignoring the very writings that we have access to is no way to go about it.
Hello, everybody. Happy Friday, you bastards. Oh! Happy Friday. You're going to need it after this show. You're going to need it. You're going to need to rest. Okay. That is what is going on in the Tennessee legislature. They are literally rewriting the constitutional history of this country in order to shield themselves from having to teach real history to students, okay? To students. This is a state representative. His name is Justin Lafferty. He is a Republican from Tennessee in the Tennessee state legislature. He is literally, he got a round of applause, almost a standing ovation from his Republican friends, as he stood on the floor and said that the Three-Fifths Compromise, which is written into the United States Constitution, it is part of the Constitution, okay, that the slaveholding South could count their slaves as 3/5 of a person, and he's saying that it was some ingenious plan that the South had to wean itself off slavery. What? Now, the Three-Fifths Compromise was a compromise the South made in order to keep their slaves and get representation for those slaves. And I don't mean voting representation. I mean appropriations. I mean cash. I mean money. And the North said, wait a minute. So you own these people. You want to continue to own humans. Okay. And you're not going to let them vote or read or do anything, right? So we say they don't count. They don't count at all. You can't count people for the purpose of representation, for the purpose of appropriations, for the purpose of apportioning, delegations, voting, delegations in the federal government, if you're not going to let them vote, if you're not going to let them be free, if you're not going to let them be full people. And they're arguing, the Three-Fifths Compromise was the South actually saying, we have an interest in ending slavery, and so we don't want to... What the... Honestly, this is...
Tennessee State Representative Justin Lafferty took to the House floor Tuesday, delivering an impassioned speech during a debate over legislation aimed at limiting funding to public and charter schools if they teach critical race theory, a practice that sees racism entrenched in laws and institutions, and one that has become a prime target for some conservatives lately.
I've heard referenced in here, as you all have, the Three-Fifths Compromise. I challenge everybody that can hear my voice, pull out a piece of paper, write down why that compromise was reached.
Admittedly speaking off the cuff, Lafferty went on, defending what he called a bitter but necessary compromise, erroneously claiming it was a way to end slavery.
The Three-Fifths Compromise was a direct effort to ensure that southern states never got the population necessary to continue the practice of slavery everywhere else in the country.
What?
By limiting the number of population in the count, They specifically limited the number of representatives that would be available in the slaveholding states, and they did it for the purpose of ending slavery.
Yet the 3/5 compromise wasn't about ending slavery at all. It was one of a number of pro-slavery compromises baked into the Constitution during negotiations in 1787 about congressional apportionment and taxation. What Representative Lafferty failed to mention is that the compromise meant that a state could count 3/5 of its enslaved population toward its total population, even though enslaved people had no rights and certainly couldn't vote. That gave Southern states more representation and effectively more political power. Lafferty's speech received a round of applause from some of his colleagues.
Dude, what's wrong with you? This is why we need to teach critical race theory. This is why we need to actually insert ourselves into the curricula that is taught to our children in this country, because you have these people who are so afraid, they're called conservatives, who are so afraid that our kids will learn the real truth of America and slavery and why we had the audacity to tell a person that they were 3/5 of a person and then claim it was for their own protection. This is what the South teaches their kids. This is what they and it's spreading. It's not just Tennessee, and it's not just the South. Here's a Colorado state representative talking about the 3/5 compromise. Now, when I hear it happening in more than one legislature, then I sort of kind of know that this is one of those ALEC deals. I sort of kind of know that this is one of those pre-written pieces of legislation that come pre-written, handed to Republicans in various states through organizations who have an interest in not teaching or not funding or not whatever, and that they have written to these legislatures that there's money in it for them. You know, that this Koch brothers lobbying group or ALEC or whatever, they'll hold some fundraisers for you if you get on the floor and you preach what's written on this piece of paper. And it works. It works.
Last month in Colorado, during a debate on civics education in schools, State Representative Ron Hanks said this.
The 3/5 compromise, of course, was an effort by non-slave states to try to reduce the amount of representation that the slave states had. It was not impugning anybody's humanity.
Just minutes before.
Wait, what? It was not impugning. First of all, Republicans have very few words. And you know why they have very few words? Because the words are written by somebody else, handed to them, and then they get paid to say them. So that's why there's very few words. And that the words that they use are the same in Tennessee as they are in Colorado. What are the chances that the Colorado legislature not only decided to take up the 3/5 compromise as an issue, at the same time Tennessee's legislature decided to take up the 3/5 compromise as an issue on their own, and that the words that they used to defend teaching the truth to children in the classroom were identical? What's the chance of that happening just on its own? Zero. That's the chance. Zero. There is no chance. There is no chance. And for him to add his own little riff at the end there, this Colorado state legislator, to say, and this impugns no man. Are you freaking kidding me? How do you not impugn a human being by telling them that they are only 3/5 of a human man? How does that work in your freaky little mind? God, they're such an amazingly failed policy bunch, okay? And this brings us to Liz Cheney and this whole Republican, ridiculous, quest to Trumpinize, to make the Republican Party loyal to just this creature, this orange yam of a man, this Donald Trump, by purging itself of people who keep bringing up what conservatism does to the American population. What does it do? It enrages them, and then it gives them somebody else to blame other than conservatives.
A things Randi at RandiRhodes.com.
Go for launch.
Speaking truth to power, the Randi Rhodes Show.
The Three-Fifths Compromise, of course, was an effort by non-slave states to try to reduce the amount of representation that the slave states had. It was not impugning anybody's humanity.
Just minutes before Hank spoke, fellow state representative Jennifer Bacon urged a different approach.
As someone who is recognized as three-fifths, we do need to understand each other when we talk about these things. There's something to be said about the literacy of power in this country and all the steps that were taken to keep people from it.
Now, CNN reached out to Representative Lafferty for a response to his statements on the floor Tuesday, but we haven't heard back yet. Interestingly, though, John, there are a bunch of bills on the table to stop schools from talking about systemic racism right now, but no one is pushing for new laws to teach students about the legacy of slavery or what's actually in the Constitution.
How freaking sad is that? You want to know? I like the way this Representative Bacon put it. We need to understand each other, and then we need to understand I wouldn't have said literacy of power. I would have said the illiteracy of power. People making laws in this country to restrict the teaching of real American history from the classrooms of our children in order to infect their brains with some lunatic, fringy view of the Constitution of the United States. If the Constitution of the United States set out to destroy slavery before Abraham Lincoln, what are they talking about? It did not set out to destroy slavery. Literally, the South wanted to count their slaves for the purpose of apportionment, for the purpose of representation in the federal government, in the federal House of Representatives, okay? And the North said, no, you're not going to count people that don't have any rights as people. That's just plain wrong. You want to hold slaves? Hold slaves. But we're not. And they said, well, can we count them as 4/5 of a minute? No! How about 3? Meet us in the middle. Well, 2.5 would have been the middle. 3, we'll take 3. 3/5 of a minute. Oh, and it wasn't done to, diminish the importance of a man. What? No, we cannot keep teaching this crap and then expect that at the end of teaching this crap, we're going to have an understanding of what needs to be fixed in this country, or what went wrong, or why it's wrong, or how is it possible to have a man so arrogant about his position, his powers and authority in this country, that he could stand on a man's neck for 9 minutes and 29 seconds looking straight to camera. No, it doesn't work that way. Obviously, it doesn't work that way. That's why people were freaked out when Lindsey Graham said there's no racism in this country, when Tim Scott said there's no racism in this country. Obviously, the racism in this country can be addressed if we just taught the racism in this country and had a discussion about it in a free and open and fact-based manner. It would lead to understanding each other, which would be a good thing, no? It would be a very good thing, but no. Can't have that because white people are afraid that black people will find out that white people, after all, aren't that special. And that can't happen. That cannot occur. We cannot lose our pigment privilege. And the demographics are changing. And what if we lost our pigment privilege and then black people became the majority? Wouldn't they want to kick our butts? No, see, this is the thing. No one is interested in revenge. And this is what white people who are afraid of a demographic shift in this country, this is exactly what they're afraid of. I get this question all the time from, black members of this audience who are really trying to understand white people. And they say, well, what are white people so freaking afraid of? And I think half of them, half of the people that are asking expect me to say revenge or something like this so that they can reassure me. No, white people of good faith aren't afraid of revenge. White people of good faith understand what's really going on here. See, white people who know black people, white people who are willing to know black people, white people who live in neighborhoods that are mixed race neighborhoods or have mixed race families or mixed race family friends or whatever it is, we understand success is the best revenge. We get that. And I taught it to my kid. I taught it to my kid who is a mixed race kid. We get that. What white people who are afraid of demographic change are really afraid of, deep down inside, isn't revenge. What they're afraid of is that they're not that special. And that's why they don't want to teach how unbelievably special people who have been discriminated against, who have been prejudiced by our entrenched system of racism, can wake up every morning with a song in their heart and a desire to succeed as being the best revenge. They cannot figure it out. They just can't. How is it possible that you could be deprived of lending and deprived of moving to this neighborhood or that neighborhood in an institutionalized manner and still persevere and be gracious and graceful and loving and family centered and religious? How is that possible? It's possible because any human being who views success as the best revenge can be gracious. It's just, and honestly, it's everywhere. It is everywhere.
No Republican should be allowed to deny the existence of systemic racism without first being asked to define systemic racism. And for those at home who want a refresher, it's defined quite well, quite aptly by the Cambridge Dictionary, sorry Oxford, as the policies and practices that exist throughout a whole society or organization and that result in and support a continued unfair advantage to some people and unfair or harmful treatment of others based on race. So, the US doesn't fit that definition? Really? This is a country in which black people continue to be underrepresented in elected positions at all levels. Just 3 black senators, including Tim Scott, out of 100, and just 11 black senators total in American history, out of almost 2,000. 0 black governors today, and just 4 in all of American history. Only 1 black president out of 45. This is a country in which black people have higher unemployment rates, higher poverty rates, lower average incomes, and lower home ownership rates than white people, in which black people are more likely than white people to face discrimination in the workplace or have loan applications approved. A country in which the median white household has 8 times the wealth of a median black household. A country in which black Americans are more likely than white Americans to be arrested. Once arrested, they are more likely to be convicted, and once convicted, they are more likely to face stiff sentences.
There's no racism. There is, but in spite of that racism, the people who are the victims of it sing.
Call in, connect. To speak to Randi, call 561-270-3844.
561-270-3844. A country in which black drivers are more likely to be stopped and searched than white drivers. In which black people are 3 times more likely than white people to be killed by the police. A country in which black people have been overrepresented on death rows, and the killers of black people are less likely to face the death penalty than people who kill white people. A country in which, even before the pandemic, black Americans were 1.5 times as likely as white Americans to lack health insurance, and had a life expectancy 3.5 years shorter than their white counterparts. A country in which last year, during the pandemic, black Americans were 1/3 more likely to die from COVID-19 than white Americans. What do we call this, if not systemic racism?
Laura in Mississippi.
This is Laura Patterson. I am so tired of hearing the TV and the news talking about races. It's the the problem is about the races. It's the news and all that are keeping that going. And what about the Black Lives Matter? No one has stopped the Black Lives Matter. They are not American. They need to be shipped to another country. And a lot of the white people need to paint their faces black because they're talking about the white people all the time. They never stand up for the white people. And another thing, I want to say this. They're talking about how hard the black people have it. I'm an older white person, and when I was growing up, we picked cotton with our hands. We did not have inside bathrooms.
All right, I've heard enough from you. All right, shut up now. You ready? Because you're a racist, Laura. I hate to tell you. But
no,
yeah, you are. You're a racist. You are a racist. Yes, you are. But I have a question for you. I have a question for you. I need you to answer one question. One question. She won't.
A lot of white people have not had
Laura. 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 Oh, Laura. Laura. Laura.
On the news.
Laura. 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 There's no hope. There's no chance.
She was absolutely charming.
Oh, she was the perfect model of a racist, of a Southern white racist. Perfect model.
I want to make sure you got that bit about you should be painting your face black because you do not defend white people at all.
Yes, I did. And I heard that they should be removed from our country. Black people should. Right there.
I was hoping you were going to ask her if she had any suggestions where they should be shipped to.
Oh, well, you know what she would have said. No, I was going to ask her whose job it is to solve the inequality that exists in our system of justice for black people, or our system of economics for black people, or our system of banking for black people, or our system of voter suppression against black people. Whose job is it to fix that? Because it's the white people who made the systemic racism systemic. That's who has to fix it. They're the ones who legislated it. They're the ones who have to unlegislate it. Otherwise, Laura, we would have to get you to go vote for African American representation so that they could fix it themselves. And you won't do it because you're a racist. So therefore, it falls to people of good conscience who have their hands on the levers of power. We just went through an entire list of the representation that black people do not have in this country. You have no black governors, okay? You have 11, in the history of the United States, 11 black senators. In the whole history, out of 2,000 black senators, 11 of them were black. One black president out of 45. And you declared an end to racism, right? Because we had one black president out of 45 who, by the way, got people like you incensed to the point where you said exactly what you said to me. He's not American. He can't be president. Birtherism, right? Laura and her ilk actually said that when we had our first and only black president in 45 presidents, 46 now, that he wasn't an American. He couldn't be the United States president. She actually went down the Trump road with the birtherism, right? And I know you did because you just said it to me. You just said it to me, you freak. Talk about lack of self-awareness. Holy Jeezel Pete. Mother of Murgatroyd. Unfreaking believable. Unfreaking believable. And you know, that's what this voter suppression, by the way, the voter suppression, you saw that Governor Ron DeSantis decided yesterday that he was going to sign a voter suppression bill, but keep the media out so he didn't have to answer any difficult questions about this racism that's attached to this voter suppression bill, right? So instead, he barred all journalists from attending and only allowed Fox News to cover his bill signing for his new voter suppression law. Okay? Texas had an all-nighter last night. They had an all-night debate. Thank God that there are some Democrats who could make their voice heard in the Texas legislature last night, because the Texas legislature was forced to water down their voter suppression bill, but it did pass and they are signing it. And Ohio Republicans, they just introduced their first voter suppression bill. This is all because African Americans decided to use absentee balloting, which was invented by Republicans. And it wasn't until Democrats in the middle of a pandemic said, I like in-person voting, because I've said it a million times, right? I like in-person voting. It makes me feel like I've done something, that I showed up for my country, that I voted, I actually took the time, I went in. But not everybody can do that. See, some people work. Some people work hours that forbid that. So Texas had drive-through voting, 24-hour drive-through voting for a couple days, right? They had drop boxes. And of course, they said, one drop box per county, one drop box for Houston, right? For Travis County. Huge county. Anyway, all these voter suppression bills are designed to suppress the vote of brown and black people as the demographics in this country change, right? And thank God she said she was an old lady, because how much more could she darken our door with her attitude? Really, how many days does she have left? Laura, your hatred is going to eat you up inside. Going to eat you up. Well, I'm glad she called, just so you can hear it for yourself. Just so you can experience it.
This is the Randi Rhodes Show. To speak with Randi, dial 561-270-3844. That's 561-270-3844.
How do you think this voting law is going to affect voter turnout?
It's going to suppress the vote, a la Georgia. I mean, it's unconscionable that Florida is doing this. It wasn't that long ago that Floridians, including Governor DeSantis, were praising the Florida vote last November, saying how flawless it was, how good it was, and now they're trying to correct something that's not broken. It makes you wonder what's going on, but I don't wonder about it very much. I think it's clearly voter suppression. It is wrong. It is anti-democracy, for crying out loud. And so the notion that they're trying to do this and make it harder for fellow Floridians to vote in the upcoming election in 2022 is obvious that they're scared they're going to lose if they don't suppress the Democratic and independent voter turnout and votes by reasonable Republicans as well. It's shameful. It really is.
It really is. But, they know no boundaries when it comes to, keeping people who disagree with them and their systemic racism and their crazy bullcrap love for police officers. This whole thing with Black Lives Matter has to do with the police and the policing in this country, right? And Laura, of course, the racist lady from Mississippi, who literally was right out of Central Casting, unbelievable. She doesn't want to admit to herself that the idea of Black Lives Matter is because police feel indiscriminately hostile towards young black men and feel empowered by our system enough to stand on a man's neck staring straight to camera for 9 minutes and 29 seconds, knowing that he had done this before and nothing bad ever happened to him, and it wouldn't this time either. And even when it's shown to her, when it's actually presented to her in a snuff film format, in its unedited entirety, the cruelty of it still makes her say Black Lives Matter doesn't matter. And that they are the problem. They are the problem. And that talking about racism is the problem, not the racism. talking about fixing it, talking about making amends, talking about repairing it, talking about, justice for all, somehow is violative of her racist views of the world, right? Now, meanwhile, what we have here is we have voter suppression laws that were passed where there was absolutely no fraud at all in the last election. And as a response to no fraud in the last election, we got ourselves a Democratic House, a Democratic Senate, and a Democratic president. Well, that can't stand, so we must go after the brown and black people who had access to the mail-in ballots in a pandemic. We didn't think they'd vote, but they did. So now we have to, keep them from the ballot box again, like we did in Mississippi and Alabama, like we did in Georgia before. And now we need to do it again. So what do? They pass voter suppression laws in Georgia, and then in Texas, and then in Florida, and then in Iowa, freaking Iowa, and then in Montana. And let me tell you something. You know what these voter suppression laws are really about? Okay, so we could tell you what's in them as far as they're going to limit the ability to use a drop box. In fact, they won't have any unmanned drop boxes. Drop boxes will now be like one per county and only in an election supervisor's office and only available during normal business hours. Yes, we know that. That's part of keeping people from being able to drop off their ballot. It also has to do with receiving the ballot, right? We know that they are going to make us here in Florida apply every single election cycle for an absentee ballot, where for years in Florida, you just got sent an absentee ballot. You just got sent one in the mail. I know, because I get sent a ballot in the mail, and I choose to take it and bring it with me so that I can in person vote on a piece of paper in a polling place. Now, I have options, right? Well, they took away the option for me to have the decision. I shouldn't be able to decide what method I would like to use to cast my ballot. Now I'm going to have to apply. Well, it's not a big thing for me because A, I know about it, and B, I like in-person voting anyway, and C, if I want an absentee ballot, I know exactly how to get one. But what about my mom? What about my mom who's 90 years old and doesn't know that the law has changed? Even though I can explain it to her, she's not going to be able to go online. My mother cannot use the internets. My mother has never Googled. She doesn't even know what that entails, okay? She does not. She can't use a cell phone. I had to get her a phone that has great big numbers on it. That's a landline, and still she has trouble with it. It has too many features, as she says. Too many features. Why can't I why is the phone beeping? It's called call waiting. I don't want that. That's my mother. When they went to like the different grid, the different TV menus, right? Where you use your remote. She doesn't know how to use her remote. Do you know what my mother does? My mother leaves her TV on at all times. She just mutes it when she goes to sleep, but it's on all the time. Why? Because I can't go there every single day, and she has difficulty figuring out HDMI 1, HDMI 2, HDMI 3. She can't go from Netflix to regular TV. She can't do it. And that's whose vote they're trying to suppress here in Florida. So if I were Laura, I'd be a little wigged out, but she's used to, voter suppression. I don't even know if she votes. I didn't even get that far with her. She just refused. But I'll tell you what this voting suppression law is really, really, really about. And I don't think anybody's really brought it up, and I think we need to bring it up like right freaking now, and every time we talk about it, remind yourself that what it's really, really about is having Laura empowered as a poll watcher. Oh, yes. That is what this is about. This is about giving new powers, and it's in all these voter suppression bills, okay? All of them. That you give new powers to partisan poll watchers who can videotape people now, who can get in people's faces now, who can look over your shoulder, and your secret ballot ain't so secret anymore. And God help you if you have a problem with a poll watcher watching you cast your ballot. That's what this is about. This is about, because this is what Donald Trump wanted. Remember, Donald Trump was saying, that we needed armies of poll watchers. You should sign up to be a poll watcher. Remember that? Well, that's what these laws are doing. Empowering those lunatic fringy Lauras and Karens and weirdos and Kevins and insurrectionists and just seriously, they have a word for it now. People, you know, they're actually using it as a defense in the insurrectionist trials. They're calling it Foxitis, Foxmania. I swear to God, there's a man who needs to defend himself against all these federal charges because he beat cops. He beat cops. That's why, you know, this idea that they love cops and that the Black Lives Matter is somehow, you know, messing with cops. No, they hate cops. They hate cops that police them. They like cops that police others. Yeah, go police the others. Don't police me. You police me, I'm going to beat you with your own shield. You police me, I'm going to take your ammunition right off your belt. You police me, I'm going to bear spray you. You police me, I'm going to beat you with a flagpole with a Blue Lives Matter flag on it. And then I'm going to go to court and I'm going to say I watched too much Fox TV and I got Foxitis. I got propagandized. I swear there's a lawyer who is representing his client to the best of his ability who is charged with federal crimes for beating police officers at the insurrection. And the defense is he suffers from Foxitis. I swear to God. That he watched too much, and they're calling it in court propaganda, that he watched too much propaganda, that he lost his job during COVID, and he moved in with some roommates in Chicago. Okay, go figure. He moved in with some roommates in Chicago, and they watched Fox. He never did before. But when he moved in with these roommates, Fox was on all the time, and it just scrambled his brain. And he started to believe the propaganda that was broadcast on Fox News. And he literally was, the lawyer is trying to say he literally has a condition called Foxmania, or he suffers from Foxitis. I swear to God. I swear to you, that is what judges are hearing as a defense for beating police officers, for white men beating police officers. It is literally being presented in court. And remember, when Fox gets sued for defamation for lying, and they get caught lying, right? And a company, feels it's been damaged, or a person feels that they've been damaged, and that Fox knowingly told lies about them, which is what defamation is, that you knowingly, because they're public. They're a public figure. Tucker is a public figure. I'm a public figure. There's a high standard, right, for us. They say, no reasonable person believes Fox News. No reasonable person would believe Tucker Carlson or anything he spews. Everyone knows he's making crap up. And now they're saying, not everyone knows. Some people are suffering. Suffering.
Mary had a little lamb.
We believe that all men are created equal.
The magnificent mosaic that is America. From radio beacon to radio beacon. I have a dream today. Change has come to America.
Believe me. Help is on the way.
Knock, knock. Who's there?
It's a figment of your imagination.
Randi Rhodes Show. Turn up your mind.
An insurrectionist arguing in court that too much Fox News propaganda is to blame for his behavior at the Capitol on January 6th. A lawyer for the alleged rioter Anthony Antonio, lawyers say that he watched Fox News for 6 months straight leading up to the insurrection. They say Antonio developed Foxitis and Foxmania. Boy, that sounds serious. Is there a doctor in the house? The lawyer told the court that Antonio believed the lies about the 2020 election that were, quote, fed to him by Fox News and the former president. Antonio facing several charges from his actions that day, including violent entry, obstruction of law enforcement, and destruction of government property. Prosecutors allege Antonio yelled at officers, "You want war? We got war. 1776 all over again." As the assault on the Capitol went on, prosecutors say he was in a group of people pushing against officers in a tunnel. He then broke into the building through a smashed window. Fox News made him do all of that? The defense, all the more confounding when you compare it to what Fox News says when they are in court. The propaganda network has argued themselves that what's said on air should not be taken as fact. A judge even finding that excuse credible in a defamation suit against host Tucker Carlson. A U.S. district judge agreeing that Fox News is not real, truthful news.
I'm not kidding. Anthony Antonio. Okay, he was doomed the second his parents named him Anthony Antonio, but okay, that's it. Anthony Antonio said that he lost his job, he moved in with roommates in Chicago, and they watched Fox News all the time, and he succumbed to the propaganda and now suffers from Fox mania, from Fox-itis. His lawyer literally made that argument in court. His lawyer's name is Joe Hurley. Joe Hurley. Oh, Joe, oh, Joe, oh, Joe, oh, Joe. I mean, he's probably sitting there congratulating himself over his glass of scotch going, I got a defense. I know what to do with this guy. He's on videotape screaming at police officers. He's ranting. He's raving. He's, screaming 1776 mother, right? I'm going to overthrow the government. This is revolution. I'm getting violent all over here. I got a defense. Anthony, what do you watch on TV? Fox News. There you go. Bam! Bingo! Done, right? And by the way, that hearing where his lawyer stood up and said that, I swear to God, his hearing, Anthony Antonio's hearing, got really, really chaotic. This happened yesterday. There was another alleged rioter who was waiting for his hearing, and when he heard Anthony Antonio's attorney Joe Hurley trash Fox News, he got very animated. His name is Landon Copeland. He's a 33-year-old. Anthony Antonio's a 27-year-old, okay? Landon Copeland, he's charged with several federal offenses too, including assaulting officers, throwing a metal fence at a law enforcement officer. And he went on a rancid, belligerent, obscenity-laden tirade against the judge when the lawyer for Anthony Antonio literally made his argument that his client suffers from Fox-itis, that he succumbed to the propaganda that is blaring out of his television 24/7. This man Copeland, who's from Utah, he screamed, I object. I swear to God, he's waiting for his hearing. I object. And then he said, F all of you, because they called Fox News propaganda. F all of you. And then he started, you can't come get me if I don't want you to. I don't like any of you people. So the judge ordered him taken away from mental competency. So you can see that this Fox mania, this Fox-itis thing is catching on. This Fox-itis thing is literally going to become a defense in the cases of violent far-right. And by the way, Anthony Antonio, he's a member of the 3 Percenters. And we know that because he's caught on video screaming at police officers in 1776, which, was tweeted by, Marjorie Taylor Greene, the QAnon lady representative, right? She tweeted that out. Boebert also. This is 1776, right? Go get them, overturn your own government kind of thing. Engage in sedition. Overthrow your own government like they were freaking Al-Qaeda or something, the base. Anyway, Anthony Antonio is on videotape screaming at police officers, quote, you want war? We got war. 1776 all over again. And then he's on the video being handed a riot shield, which was stolen from a police officer, and he used the shield against the officer to push his way to the front of a crowd, right? Now, on that video, you can see him, and he's wearing a 3 Percenters insignia. So we know who he is, and we know what he believes in, and we know, who he affiliates with. Now, I will tell you this. Watching Fox News is not going to become a criminal defense in a criminal case, and this is a criminal case. But it could very well become a issue for Fox News. It could actually be a civil case that's brought by concerned citizens through the Department of Justice to say that not only are they facing $1 billion lawsuit again, that's been brought by Dominion for knowingly lying about Dominion flipping votes, and Smartmatic being aligned with dead Hugo Chavez, who's been dead for 10 years or more, well, a little less than 10 years, and Rudy Giuliani also facing $1 billion lawsuit for this kind of lying, and Tucker Carlson, and facing defamation lawsuits for lying about people, but really, this you cannot excuse somebody's criminal violent behavior because of what they watched on the TV. Okay, that can't happen.
To be honest with you, I think history books will be written about this. And so we're going to regroup. We're going to look to our leader, Donald Trump, as our president. And when I say leader, I don't mean a cult, but I mean as our country, because we're American people. And we're going to see what happens. We're going to continue making our voices heard, making a difference, especially the patriots that were out there on January 6th on the front line.
On the front line. So that's Anthony Antonio excusing his behavior. All right, here's Carrie Cordero. She is a legal analyst. She covers, the law for CNN.
Carrie, this is one of the more creative defenses that we have heard, that he was effectively brainwashed by watching TV. What do you
watching TV?
Good morning, Brianna. So this is something that his defense attorney is certainly entitled to argue, but it is not going to be a persuasive defense to the conduct that is being alleged. I mean, let's talk about the actual investigator's affidavit that's filed in this case. What it alleges the defendant did on January 6th includes a wide range of charges: unauthorized entry into the Capitol complex, disorderly conduct, physical violence. I'm looking at my notes because I wrote down a few of the charges: physical violence on the grounds, obstructing a proceeding. And this individual, Mr. Antonio, he was present in the vicinity when MPD officer Fanone was being brutally beaten by the crowd. He saw it. He threw something at the officer. So what the court eventually, if he does not plead guilty to the charges, is going to be looking at is the actual conduct and the video evidence and other evidence that exists in the case, not his allegations that he was brainwashed by watching TV.
Yeah, no. When you get physical, you can't blame the TV.
All things Randi at RandiRhodes.com.
Go for launch.
Speaking truth to power, the Randi Rhodes Show.
But what is Fox's responsibility? Because they do bear some responsibility for lying the way they do under the banner of news. So here's a little discussion about that.
Is Fox responsible for, feeding these lies to folks?
Well, it'll be interesting to see sort of as these all progress, there'll be a different track between the criminal prosecutions that are going on right now and whether or not there are civil cases that get filed against Fox in the future for inspiring this conduct. But, you mentioned the national security angle. And I think one of the things, Brianna, that's been so interesting for researchers and experts who follow terrorism of the last couple decades is that what we used to see when it was Al-Qaeda inspired or ISIS inspired online radicalization. The government, the intelligence community had different guidelines that they looked at that demonstrated a path of radicalization that an individual here in the United States was subject to, that then went from being a regular person to somebody who believed the propaganda that they were consuming online. And some of the terrorism researchers see the same type of pattern of radicalization and believing the propaganda that they are consuming when it comes to some of this far-right extremism, as well as the lie about election fraud.
Yeah, I mean, the case they make is convincing, and the parallels here are disturbing, as you point out.
Yes, it is disturbing. So is Fox responsible for radicalizing its viewers around a lie, a big lie, a giant lie? Is Fox responsible for inspiring violence? Is Fox responsible for any of its conduct? That is the case that needs to be brought. Now, that would be a civil case, not a criminal case, meaning it would be a case for money, just like defamation is a civil case, a case for money, where money damages are paid. But there can also be sanctions that are levied against Fox News. For instance, something I've been arguing for since 2005, actually testified in front of Congress about. If you're going to brand yourself news, you must follow accepted journalistic practices. You must fact check. You need an ombudsman. You need to show, and that's why I do homework every single day. I need to show what I'm relying on in order to say what I'm saying. Fox News will never show you what they're relying on to say what they're saying because they're not relying on anything factual. Tucker Carlson is sitting on his TV show telling people that he's looked at the vaccine adverse effects website, VAERS. Now, I want you to know, I got my shots. I filed a VAERS report because I experienced a couple of weird symptoms, a couple of weird side effects. They're gone now. Well, one of them's gone. The other one's not. But I experienced a couple of weird side effects, and I didn't know if it was from the vaccine or not from the vaccine, but I decided that I was going to self-report that I got the vaccine and I experienced these two side effects. And I was entitled to do that under penalty of perjury, mind you. Which, by the way, the warning shows up on the VAERS pages as you're filling out your VAERS form, and you need a lot of information to file a VAERS form, okay? You need to know what batch number of vax you got. You need to know where you got it, the address of where you got it, and you need to show the second, like if you're going to do the first and second dose, and you're going to say that you had adverse reactions after, but you need both batch numbers, okay? And you have to do it, and you have to do it within 10 minutes. Within 10 minutes. If you don't do it within 10 minutes, then your application or your report is wiped out and you have to start all over again. That's how they make it so difficult to file a VAERS report, just to keep people from saying things that are based on absolutely nothing. Like you need to know what batch number you got, etc., right? And the reason why they do that is so that they can look at that batch and they can see, was there anything wrong with that batch? Were there any other people who got vaccinated in that batch, from that batch, that are reporting similar symptoms, right? But Tucker Carlson is sitting there saying that the actual information on VAERS, meaning somebody was 90 years old, got a Moderna vaccine, for instance, or a Pfizer vaccine, just, it doesn't matter. And that, 2 weeks later, they died, that the vaccine caused their death. It doesn't work that way. It's just, it's supposed to be a self-reporting system so that you can have people check out and find out if any of your issues were caused by that batch. Because if he's, he's sitting there and he's saying causation. He's saying that because a 90-year-old got a shot and died 2 weeks later from, I don't know, congestive heart failure, or died from, a stroke, or died from, heart failure, whatever, that the vaccine caused it. You can't do a causation connection from a VAERS report, okay? Because if I were going to do that, then I could do this. I could say to you, 100% of the people who died this week in America, in Florida, in Lake Worth, Florida, all swallowed before they died. And swallowing caused their death. See what I mean? You can't draw a causation connection between somebody dying and the shot unless there's some connection in that batch of shots that others also succumbed from that particular batch of shots. Now, we've given 150 million doses. That's almost half our population have gotten one dose already, okay? And there's been a puny amount of death associated in the VAERS reports. In fact, the VAERS reports worked in this way. You know, when we had an issue about Johnson & Johnson, the VAERS reports were coming in about blood clots, and it was like 1 in a million episode that somebody who got a Johnson & Johnson vaccine then got a blood clot that was dangerous, right? And so they paused the Johnson & Johnson vaccines to go check it out. That's proof that our systems, our checks and balances with regard to the vaccines and the vaccine safety works. It proves that it works. But he's sitting on his TV show telling people 11 people have died since they got the shot, and 11 people died right after the shot. And he's saying cause that. So if you die today, I promise you, you blinked today. You blinked. But blinking didn't cause your death. If you die today, God forbid, I promise you, you swallowed. But swallowing didn't cause your death. Do you see what I'm saying? You can't draw a causal connection unless you investigate that batch and find out if other people also succumbed, and then they would pause it. But I don't think Tucker Carlson wants his audience to even live. I don't even know. I mean, it's just so strange what he's doing, just sitting there lying about death. And Sanjay Gupta, who, is a medical analyst and, has, and all the other COVID experts, the epidemiologists, they all, I don't know what's wrong with that guy. Why is he doing it?
Call in, connect. To speak to Randi, call 561-270-3844. 561-270-3844.
Between late December of 2020 and last month, a total of 3,362 people apparently died after getting the COVID vaccine in the United States. 3,362. That's an average of roughly 30 people every day. So what does that add up to? Nothing. By the way, that reporting period ended on April 23, and we don't have numbers past that, not quite up to date. But we can assume that another 360 people at that rate have died in the 12 days since. So you put it all together, and that is a total of 3,722 deaths. That's almost 4,000 people who died after getting the COVID vaccines. The actual number is almost certainly higher than that, perhaps vastly higher than that. The data we just cited come from the Vaccine Adverse Events Reporting System, VAERS. VAERS is managed by the CDC and the FDA. VAERS has received a lot of criticism over the years, some of it founded. Some critics have argued for a long time that VAERS undercounts vaccine injuries. A report submitted to the Department of Health and Human Services in 2010 concluded that, quote, fewer than 1% of vaccine adverse events are reported by the VAERS system, fewer than 1%. So what is the real number of people who apparently have been killed or injured by the vaccine? Well, we don't know that number. Nobody does, and we're not going to speculate about it on this show.
Just asking a question, right? No. He is literally trying to kill his audience by putting out, a causal connection between 3,000 elderly people who died after they got their vaccines, meaning, of natural causes, and he's trying to say their death was caused by. Well, you can't do that because I promise you, whoever dies today was breathing before they died. And breathing doesn't cause death. But everybody who dies today or this week or this weekend or next week, I promise you, was breathing today. Was breathing right now. They were also blinking. They were also swallowing. They were also eating. And I don't think any of that, none of the food they ate and none of the blinking and none of the breathing and none of the swallowing is the reason for their death. You see what I mean? So why does he do this? Okay, a lot of people are going to speculate a lot of reasons, but I'm a broadcaster, okay? And I used to work right across the street from him on 6th Avenue, okay? I know exactly why he does it. I know exactly what it is that makes somebody do that kind of a thing. He wants to position himself for his viewers as someone very unique who has hidden truths that no one else will tell you, that he found something out that is very important to your survival, that's very important to your navigation of life itself. And only he has this information, and only he can give you this truth. That's it. That's it. He needs to make himself feel special. And he's not. This is the same old, worn-out tactic used by racists and nationalists and propagandists and anti-vaxxers and rich people who want to put their knee on your neck and make you flail in your life to blame somebody else for what he is actually allowing to have happen to you through systemic bad governance. Period. It's old. This is old as the crack in Laura's ass. Oh, a different Laura. The Laura in California.
Hello.
Hello.
Yeah, after hearing my name used over and over and over, it's Laura.
I tried. I did. I tried to, just have a little convo, but it wasn't to be.
She is so far beyond, and people like that, they know everything. They know everything. They've been telling everybody, all of their children and their grandchildren and their great grandchildren, everything that she knows, and some of it sticks.
Well,
so,
she's perpetuating a very indecent manner of behavior.
Yeah, and it's so common. I mean, all they do is they talk. Well, everybody who calls into you, but it's like they talk over everybody in their lives. And if anybody says, "But wait a minute," they just walk out of the room. And then the guilt ensues, and then you have to make grandma feel better. And it's just it's years and years and years of inculcated with racism and also guilt, and these they're very unhappy, dysfunctional people.
Yes, it's actually fear. It's all fear.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah. I mean, my in-laws are like that. I call them the fear biters.
Mm-hmm.
And this is not what I called in about, but it's related. I mean, they're angry, scared people, just like a dog underneath, a junkyard dog under a broken down truck, and you try to put your hand under to pet him, and he'll bite your hand off. So
yeah, because all the hands that came at him before your caring, wonderful, loving hand were cruel and nasty and violent hands. So,
and this is why they won't believe Joe Biden.
Right. Right.
He's like the nice hand. Not that I want to get into the whole major discussion, but what I called in about, and I'll make it super short because there's nothing new here. And Karl Marx wrote it down already, but I'm looking at this, and it's like, this is all this racism, and it's just the long tail of colonial patriarchy and classism. And it's just I've been boiling this down in my fevered brain for just decades now. It's like every time somebody says, why do they hate us so much? I mean, I've had a woman of Mexican extraction ask me exactly that question. It's like, why do they hate us? Why do they not want us to work? We're hard workers. Yes, I have political discussions with the woman who comes in and cleans house for me once a month. She's a wonderful human being. But anyway, and we got into this discussion, and I'm just like, it is the long tail of colonial patriarchy and classism. And
that's a very deep explanation for what is really very, very simple. And the reason that people hate hardworking, Mexicans or hardworking Hondurans or El Salvadorans or hardworking African Americans or hardworking Jewish people or whatever it is, that is different from them, is because it would mean that they're not special. And
exactly,
and that's it, and that is it. It's not any more complicated. These are simple-minded folk. They are, obviously politicians love their existence because they're useful idiots. But the reason why they're useful idiots for the politicians is because they're terrified that they're not special. And that if they didn't have an advantage by sheer pigment or whatever, or lack of melanin, that they would not have fared as well, and the way that they fared was not so hot anyway, but that they wouldn't have fared as well with their limited skill set, with their limited brain power. And in a weird way, they're right.
This is the Randi Rhodes Show. To speak with Randi, dial 561-270-3844. That's 561-270-3844.
I can't tell with him whether he's just so smart or so dumb. I'm just not sure at this point, but it is very reckless and dangerous. What he's talking about is this system that is an open label system where anybody can basically report an adverse event from the vaccine. Anybody can do that. And what he's done is he basically has looked at these open system adverse reporting systems and said, hey, look, this suggests that 30 people a day are dying of the vaccine. Absolutely not true. First of all, let me just show you the graphic of the impact overall of these vaccines. We know that a certain number of people die every day for all sorts of different reasons. We also know, if you take a look there at that right curve, that after the vaccination program started, death rates plummeted among the elderly. Right. We know the impact of that. This is the same reporting system that basically found a 1 in a million likelihood of someone having an adverse event from the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. Right. That's how they initially found that. These reports came in, CDC evaluates it, and they say, whoa, something going on here. Let's pause Johnson & Johnson. What Tucker Carlson is saying is that dozens of people are dying every day, and the CDC and FDA are turning a blind eye to it. It's absolutely 100% false.
Yeah, no, hundreds of people die every day, over 75 in this country, and Tucker Carlson is trying to draw what I call causation between two unrelated events, getting the vaccine and their death. Their death is something that would have happened anyway, not but for. Remember we talked about the but for Derek Chauvin's knee on George Floyd's neck, George Floyd would be alive. But for the opinion, the memo from the Office of Legal Counsel, Robert Mueller would have indicted Donald Trump for obstruction of justice 10 different times. Well, people 75 and older would have died anyway, not but for the Moderna vaccine or the Pfizer vaccine or the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. So that's what I'm saying. Everybody who will die in the next 3 years will be breathing today. But breathing today did not cause them to die. Everyone who dies over this weekend will have been blinking today. But blinking did not cause their death. Everyone who dies next week will have been swallowing today, but swallowing did not cause their death any more than getting vaccinated against a virus that has such a high mortality rate for elderly people, for seniors, especially over the age of 75, did not cause their death. So again, you have to understand why they do it over there. They do it over there because they want to appear as if they're saying some secret information that only they have the nads to tell people. No, and they're making crap up all the time to rile up their audience, to anger them to violence. And when you see the violence happen, that's when you say, that's a bridge too far. That is crossing a line that shouldn't be crossed. And you have to hold them accountable. And this propagandization of the American people has created even more useful idiots than we already would have had. So being a useful idiot doesn't cause you to do violence. But creating useful idiots based on propaganda seems to radicalize people and cause them to do violence. And Fox does bear some responsibility for adding to the number of useful idiots, especially the younger ones who are now willing and able to do violence. All Laura can do is, yell at me. But a 27-year-old guy who's claiming he was propagandized into being brainwashed, into being violent by Fox News, can't use that as a defense. But we could use it to examine what is the proper role of, what is the proper responsibility that Fox News bears for making this happen, for causing this. So, like I said, you can't just say Tucker Carlson is causing violence in a vacuum, but you can look at the batch. You know what I'm saying? And see if there are people in that batch who got that batch of propaganda who ended up going to the Capitol and beating police officers. And I think if you did, you would find that there's an adverse reaction that can be traced directly to Fox News. And that's something that our legal system has to actually once and for all do. And I've been saying that this would be the end result of a party that is indecent in its policies, that's indecent in its beliefs, that's indecent in its teachings, that's indecent in preventing people from knowing their history, orienting themselves into the real world. It's a Republican policy problem. And then it's amplified by Fox News's a willingness to draw conclusions based on nothing. That the other side, that the decent side of America, that the 70% of Americans who are decent, who would like to know the real truth all the time so that they can orient themselves, so that they can have a more prosperous, more moral bend of the arc, right, towards moral and more just. That we're being, hobbled by that 30% that sits there and watches lies all day long. But the Republicans love it because it creates even more useful idiots, and they love exploiting them. But Fox actually makes money off of exploiting them, which is why they have a responsibility to, be called to account. You can't brand yourself news and not tell the truth at all. So the least that they should face is losing the news part of the Fox name. They shouldn't be allowed to call themselves news. I'm sorry. I don't think that's such a horrendous punishment for what they do over there. Steve in Arizona.
Hey, Randy.
Hey.
I got to say this. You're spot on there. And that entity, or whatever it is nothing more than a terrorist organization, and they should be removed from the air. I think the vast majority of black people in this country, they're pretty smart. They've figured out that the system is rigged against them and stuff, and they're voting Democratic. They're not buying into this stuff. But what just drives me insane is the amount of white people, old and young, these crackers, honkies. They didn't get the memo that the system is rigged, and the average net worth in this country, the median, I should say, is about $270,000, and that's if you're at the top of your age group.
What?
Yeah, the average median net worth is about $270,000. That's
the
not
average. What? Oh.
Net worth. That's not a lot of money, and you're not like you got $4 million of net worth. You have no reason to vote Republican, and all I want to know is, when are you people going to wake up and just figure out that you're all voting against your best interest, and it just drives me insane. But anyways, Randy, have a nice weekend, enjoy your hot tub, and have a nice beer.
That's exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to have a beer. I'm going to have my Corona Premier, because it only has, 2-3 carbs in it. You can have many of them. It's wonderful. And then I'm going to sit in the tub. Because Howard was not home last weekend, and I did not even have a beer last weekend because I don't like drinking by myself. It's not my thing. But I'm getting in the hot tub. I'm going to soak away my Laura. I'm going to soak away the racism, that I had to imbibe today, that I had to go through my And then I'm going to do what Rhonda and Erie advised. Sometime over the weekend, I'm going to start to watch Exterminate All the Brutes on HBO, which the more I looked into it, the more turns on I feel about watching this. This is, a 4-part series, she told me, an hour each part. And it takes a really long, hard look at institutionalized racism inside this country. I will just say that when I looked at episode 1, the title of it is The Disturbing Confidence of Ignorance. Well, that's exactly what we were treated to from Miss Mississippi 1940 today. The Disturbing Confidence of Ignorance. Now, I did not create that. I did not write that. I may put it on a T-shirt, but Raoul Peck is the filmmaker, and I can't wait to see this. I really can't. So that's my weekend. I hope you have one, too. If you have, some time to spend with the TV, I would say HBO, Exterminate All the Brutes.